This episode of the Deep Thinkers podcast is brought to you by Bright Island Outreach. You can visit them at their website at www.brightislandoutreach.org. There you can donate straight to the cause, or you can buy a t-shirt. I wear mine all the time. It's a black t-shirt with a gold graphic on it. It's the ahimsa. They've customized it to be their logo. It's the logo that it's kind of like the logo that you see when you listen to this podcast, but a few different details that have changed, but very similar. Also, if you'd like to, you can go with them down to the DR. They go down to the Dominican Republic many times a year. There, they are networked with the local dental schools, so they take local students down into the impoverished areas, and there they provide education and hygiene, as well as extractions, fillings, root canals, cosmetics, and most importantly, follow-up. They make sure that the people down there are getting the constant care that they need in order to have good, healthy teeth. So check them out at brightislandoutreach.org, and please donate to the cause. Thank you. This episode of the Deep Thinkers podcast is brought to you by Cradle Pest Control. Cradle Pest Control was founded in 2002. It's been family owned and operated ever since. Their main gig is termites and scorpions, but they do general pest control, weed control, and rodents. When you call in to schedule your first appointment, please mention the Deep Thinkers podcast and you will get $30 off your first service. Again, that's cradlepestcontrol.com. Go ahead and check them out. Hello, Planet Earth. I am here today with MJ Stapley. How are you today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So, we are going to talk about cannabis today. For people who aren't quite into this topic yet, this might be some unfamiliar territory. I've been a big fan since the early 90s. Big fan. So not always constant. I took a little break there on my mission, when I was out there, knocking doors and serving the Lord. Of course, I've quit here and there. I smoked my first time in ninth grade. So about probably two-thirds the way through. And then put it down for a while, and then smoked a lot my sophomore year. A little bit didn't touch it at all my junior year, and smoked a little bit my senior year. And then when I got back from my mission, the chronic or a kind bud or high grade or whatever you want to call it had kind of hit Arizona by then, and it was no longer the Mexican swag scene. And once I started smoking that, it was game on at that point. Mary Jane and I have had a long-term relationship, and it's been a good positive thing for me. So
when you started it when you were young, do you mind sharing what you took it for, or was it just to? I like
curiosity. I remember being little. Maybe like 6, definitely before I was baptized, before I could ever play with a knife or anything like that. I was 8 years old, was like that's when we could get a knife, in my house. And I remember watching on the news, it was some huge cannabis festival. And people, I remember them lighting joints on a barbecue. Like there were so many, like they had laid out like 50 joints and they were just like lighting them on this barbecue. And people were talking about, it was a cannabis rights march, and I was talking to my mom, and I'm like, Mom, what are they talking about? And she goes, they're talking about marijuana. And I go, why do people do marijuana? And she said, they say it makes you feel good. And so that was my first exposure to it ever as a little kid. And it's crazy that I remember that. It was just, I had heard of other people doing it, and I've heard it wasn't that big of a deal. And it was offered to me and at that age. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's try it out. And
So when your mom said it makes people feel good, were your family against it, or because me growing up, like obviously my brother did it a lot. There was some times he got in trouble, so I had always just like only knew of it as being so bad.
Yeah, no, my parents are fairly open-minded,
That's good.
for being so devout Mormon. With
Mine are not. Yeah.
with their kids especially. There's only, I think, God, two of the five that are still into it, really. And they made a decision a long time ago that they weren't going to let their kids and their faith kind of create friction in the family. So if there's topics that we don't want the other one to hear, we know the other one doesn't want to hear, nothing we have to say to each other about hot topics is so important that we're going to like start a fight. That's kind of where we're at, these days. And my parents have spoken to doctors, and they do believe in medical marijuana. Some people don't even believe in it still.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. But yeah, so they're there. When I first got in trouble for doing the pot, my parents sat me down, and I have a stand-up bit about this. I do a little bit of stand-up. It's a hobby. I'm not a hard-working comic by anyone's standards, but my dad sat me down. My parents sat me down, and my dad asked me, "How do you do it? Do you sniff it or do you inject it?" Yeah, and he was serious. Like, I had no clue. I was so I was like, "Yeah, you smoke it." He's like, "In a pipe or a cigarette?" Or I said, "Yeah, either." And he's like, "Okay." Like they had no clue. Early on in my early 20s, my sisters got into meth. And so when they were going through rehab, my parents just kind of lumped all drugs into one category.
Yeah.
But yeah, like at one point they attempted an intervention with me. Obviously that didn't work, so here I am still smoking.
Well, I mean, I think early on too, obviously during that time, it's easy for people to think of it as a gateway drug.
For sure. Especially with AA when they're so against it.
Yeah, people in my life that had used it and then went on to have some major alcohol issues or major drug issues.
Right.
So I can see that, and that's what it's hard for people to get over that or to really get past that, to really think of it. But then you look at some of the older generation from like that grew up in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you have, the early back in the day stigma, are kind of anti, and then you have the 60s, 70s kids that smoked it.
Right.
So they're all excited it's coming back, and then so I don't know, but it's just
and they're thrilled about the quality.
There was a lot of we came across some major opiate and hardcore drug addictions, and I think because marijuana in high school was easier to get, it looked as if that was something that caused it long term. But
right.
Plus, obviously, now that it becomes more recognized, it's not going to be it's not going to be looked at as the cool drug. Like you look at Colorado, it's been legalized 5 years, and their adult teenage use is down.
Yeah, when people would ask me if I felt like it was a gateway drug, my response would be something along the lines of, well, I mean, what's the definition of a gateway drug? I mean, if anything, alcohol or aspirin or Advil can be considered a gateway drug. You're taking a drug and expecting a desired effect.
Anything, food, right. Junk food,
right.
Soda. That's what I mean. People that are overweight and eat really bad, that's an addiction. So
yeah. Oh, and I've definitely, I was 290 pounds at one point, so I've definitely.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, I'm 210 now, about. So I fluctuate between 210 and 215 now, but jiu-jitsu keeps me kind of on my weight these days. But yeah, so I definitely understand food addiction. Going back to what I was saying about a gateway drug, though, I would follow it up with this. Like, if you're going to someone's house to get something that is illegal, even if it's harmless like pot, 9 times out of 10, they make illegal stuff their business. So, I mean, you could get offered other things like, hey, I've got some blow, or hey, I've got, some pills, more than likely. I mean, I've been offered pills by, I don't know, maybe conservatively, probably 15 to 20% of the guys I bought weed from in my life,
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're that could be considered a reason why it's a gateway drug. But I mean, when you really understand it, I would put it in the same category as coffee. You know, when I drink more than one of these, like people know something's going on. Like I'm amped up. I'm talking a million miles a minute. I'm talking about terraforming Mars. I'm talking about, all kinds of weird stuff that people are like, dude, slow down,
You said you'll put cannabis in the same category as coffee? Is that what you?
As far as like, if we're going to put,
does coffee have any type of benefit for you besides of the caffeine to wake you up?
oh yeah, way more focused when I drink coffee, way more productive. Now, if I drink too much coffee, I can turn into an asshole, but all things in moderation. So,
we'll get into it later, but in terms of like actual benefits, medicinal benefits.
I'm not talking about benefits so much as I'm talking about like effects it has on your mind in the current, like, when people categorize, like they want to put weed in the same category as alcohol. And I'm like, no, not really. It's more like closer to coffee is what I'm saying on things like that.
Yeah.
So
well, people look at it as a vice. Other people, like myself, look at it as a health and wellness.
Right. Like myself as well.
But people do the same thing with cigarettes. Yeah, they look at it as, because there are people that obviously want to smoke it just to get high.
Yeah.
But, at least if they're just smoking to get high, they're still giving themselves some type of medicinal.
There are
but a lot of people aren't aware of that, and I think that's obviously where
there are head changes that you can chase that are way worse for you than pot.
Yeah.
So now you have kind of an interesting story about how you got into smoking, because I remember when you first discovered CBD online, you were like, "Oh my gosh, where has this been all my life?" Like I was like, "Had a girl," And I think we even had a conversation. You're like, "No, I don't smoke. I just do the CBD."
Yeah. So. Yeah, it was about 3 years ago. I've tried it. I smoked in college. I'm not,
I know you're not a.
I tried it in high school. I didn't really do it. I had some friends that loved it. I wasn't that into it. I didn't really know much about it. My brother grew it in our front yard at one time. Like we'd want to out there watering the bushes. But he would have,
wait, stop real quick. Front yard.
He just had one little weed, one flower growing.
What year was this?
This was, I don't even know. We lived right by Mountain View in Mesa.
So this is like
I graduated in 2001, so it was probably like 99.
Wow, that's crazy.
We didn't know. We had no idea. He'd be out there watering the bush, and we're like, "What's he doing? Like, why would he be watering the bush?" Until our landscaper came over and noticed it.
Yeah.
So I mean, I only correlated it with kind of being bad most of my life. Not really know much of it. College, I did it. It was more just to get the high. Like people had it, you tried it. But that's the thing. It wasn't, I knew I'd heard like, oh yeah, it helps my, I had some friends who were like, oh yeah, it helps my girlfriend's dad has cancer and he smokes it because it helps relieve, like get his mind off of it, things like that. So I knew there were a little bit of benefits, but it wasn't until that day I was at a happy hour with one of my best friends out here in San Diego. And this guy was sitting next to us, and we were talking about our sales jobs and we, how we hate our current job. We were working together. She had just left. So we were meeting up, and he kind of chimes in. He was like, "Hey, we just, I'm a director of sales of this, CBD company. I hear you guys talking about sales. We're trying to hire sales reps. I just wanted to ask like where you're at with jobs, and have you heard about CBD?" And I was like, "CBD? No, I had no idea.
I don't do computer sales. Sorry."
Yeah, CBD. Like what? What does that stand for? So he kind of started going off about it, like, oh, this is the next big thing. It's going to help, and so I had trouble with sleeping. So I had a problem with taking sleeping pills, whether it be Tylenol PM. In college, I was given Ambien. Then I went off of it, Tylenol PM, Trazodone. Yeah. Oh yeah. I couldn't believe in college I was given that. Now that I look back on it,
Yeah.
That was so easily available, but I always had to take something to go to sleep. So I was just like, okay, I asked him like, would it help with my sleep? He was like, yeah, it will. And so I was like, well, if you have a sample, I'll try it over the weekend, when I have nothing to do Saturday. So I'll try it, because if I don't get any sleep, I'm not going to try it tonight. I go, and then I'll email you, and I'll look it up and look into it. So he gave it to me, and so sure enough, that weekend I tried it, and I slept great. I couldn't believe it. I woke up like, what? Like,
Yeah.
I didn't take my Tylenol PM. How did this happen? So then I started just researching it and looking. I was curious, and so I emailed him, let him know, hey, it worked great. And he's like, hey, just come into our office, like, come check it out. We're hiring. And I was like, and at the time I was making great money. I had a great job. I was a manager at a for-profit education at Ashford University, and
Nice.
but it was also one of those things where I wanted to. Well, so back up a little bit. I have a little bit of crazy story where I went through. I don't know. Are you familiar with the Landmark Forum? It's big in Arizona, so I don't know if you've heard of it.
I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is. I don't know what the reference is or anything like that. I mean, when you say Landmark, I think of the old restaurant in downtown Mesa that's no longer open. So
Landmark.
they had a great
it's just it's like weekend courses. It's a seminar that you go to.
Okay.
Kind of helps you. People go for many different reasons.
Okay.
Go whether I was going for business, kind of see where I was at, help with my communication and business and life, like figure out where I want to go. Some people go for relationship and just many different things you go to. It's like a 3-day, 12-hour-a-day seminar. And so I had gone through that right before I met this guy, and I had actually put out there that last day you get up and you talk about, what you're going to make for yourself and where you want to be. And I had said that I wanted to start in a new industry that I could make a difference, that actually made a difference and helped people, and where I could eventually like grow and either start my own business or grow with a company. So I put that out there, not knowing anything about the cannabis industry. That was just something I had put out there. So then when I met this guy and I started researching, and then I went and met with them, it was a CBD company. They were called Cannabis at the time. They were a publicly traded CBD hemp company. So I met with them several times, and I just kept going back and forth. And it just felt like, okay, this industry is about to explode. It's a huge industry. This is something I totally believe in. At the time, like you said, I was throwing it all over Facebook, trying to let everybody know, like, you guys have to try CBD. You have to look into this.
Yeah.
And so
my mom and my sisters have actually, I think, tried it, and they're both totally, completely Mormon.
Oh yeah,
it's
it's funny. It's people, can still correlate it with weed, but it's once you understand the science, once you really get to the breakdown of like the research and the science and actually cannabis in general, even THC, the component that gets you high, tetrahydrocannabinol, that's the component that gets you high. For those of you that don't know much about cannabis, but even THC has medicinal benefits. So it's not just, I'm just going to take the CBD, but certain elements you have, and you're going to see this come out as more research is done, and now that we can finally start doing research, is that even you're going to need that THC component. Yeah, you can do certain levels based on, work your tolerance up based on not getting too high, but you're going to need that. Certain elements will need the THC with the CBD, right?
Right.
But the CBD, is a great entering point for people that are not really sure, don't want to get high.
Well, and even if you want THC, even if you want THC, but you don't want to get high, I mean, it is possible to eat it cold, and or juice it fresh. Yeah, or juice it fresh, and it's only when it's baked over a certain temperature that it actually becomes psychoactive.
You have to decarboxylate it. And that's the other thing is, decarboxylate.
Yeah, that was I was like, what? I've never heard that term. That was
decarboxylation.
Decarboxylation. I'm gonna use that next time I smoke and be like, all right, boys, let's decarboxylize. So.
Well, that's the other thing too, is there's even certain products out there, THC products, that don't necessarily get you super high.
Right.
So you can like 1-to-1 ratio. There's ratios out there.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, is you can even smoke a 1-to-1. You're not really going to get high. You're just going to get more of a smooth, but it's still stimulating, or it's binding to those receptors in your body.
Right.
So that's why, I mean, the first thing I ask people if I get slack or people say something to me is, or talk bad about it, is I ask them, like, do you know what the endocannabinoid system is? Right. Do you know,
millions of receptors in your body that are just waiting for this stuff.
Yeah, so
for sure.
So that's what I get people on that angle, like, okay, you understand it. And when people want to know more, that's when you start really kind of giving them an explanation of the science, then it starts to make more sense.
Yeah.
But I'll have a lot of people like, oh, I just want CBD. I don't want that THC stuff, or smoke it, or smoke it and be lazy. But I'm like, dude, smoking it sometimes is best for you for certain ailments, or like vaping is really good if you have major joint pain.
Right.
Versus taking an edible, or so there's certain ways, and as science comes, obviously more and more that's going to come out.
Yeah.
But it's still very fresh. So.
Yeah, and it's so important that the science comes out, because I mean, we're still in the Wild West. Now more and more you're starting to see percentages of THC when people buy stuff at dispensaries and things like that. But for a long time it was just, this is what it is. It's Bubba Kush or it's OG. But now you're actually starting to see a little more uniformity behind it. I think for the novice user, the most important thing to get dialed in is edibles, because I mean, really, if you have a bad experience with edibles early on, it can scare you away from it permanently. I mean, edible. I always tell people, like, hey, unless you are a little more familiar with it, edibles or THC edibles, like, you don't really have any business eating those for a while. Buy an oil pen.
It takes so long to kick in, so then you think you need more.
Right.
And all of a sudden it hits you, and you're paranoid, closing all your blinds and under your cover because you're freaking out, and then you never want to
literally think if you've died, and you're curling up in the bathtub, and I've heard some bad stories from some close friends. I have a bad story. I mean, and let's hear it.
I've tried it, but it was just recently, actually, when I was flying to Toronto for an investor forum. So I was on a plane, and so I was with two colleagues. I went through this business accelerator when I started my company, and we'll get into that later too, when I started what company I started in the cannabis industry. So we were on a flight, and so he gave me just like a little 5 milligram Kiva coffee edible. So I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. That'll chill me out. But then a couple minutes later, he pulled out these Cushy Punch edibles, and they're 25 milligram. And I should have known. I know that with edibles, when I take edibles for sleeping and stuff, 10 milligrams is perfect for me.
Yeah.
But I was just on the plane, and I wanted to chill out. I wanted to pass out. So I was like, I'm going to take that too. So I took it. Literally, it only took like 20 minutes to kick in, and I had a major panic attack. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the bathroom and try to throw up to get it out of my system.
Yeah.
Being on an airplane, and then if you're already paranoid, and I already hate flying, it just had like the opposite effect than I expected it. So I was in the bathroom for 30 minutes just trying to talk myself. And luckily I know, and I've dealt with it before, and I've dealt with clients, I've dealt with customers who've had this issue. So I knew how to talk myself down. Yeah. But I can only imagine if someone for the first time was trying it, especially on an airplane. And I think it happened in Seattle. A guy was trying to open the gate. The gate door while they're in the air, and he like fought off the stewardess. This was in Seattle a few months ago.
Whoa.
So being on the plane, I knew like that when I remember looking at the gate, like, oh, I really want to open that. Like, you want to like get out of where you are, because you're like, oh. Kind of panicking. But then I talked myself out of it, went back and passed out. Like, I was like, right. But you kind of just feel like you're paranoid, and you're kind of on a spaceship. That's how it felt on the plane. Yeah. But I totally, seeing that, I'm like, I can't imagine people that don't really understand or have never tried it, and then they just go to the dispensary, and the bud tender's like, oh, hey, yeah, try this. This is awesome. This gets me high. And then they take it. Man. Yeah. And I could totally see where you would freak out and want to jump off.
There's a YouTube video out there that's hilarious. It's a cop who stole a bag of weed from some kids. And him and his wife bake it into brownies, and it's a 911 call, and they think they're overdosing, and he thinks he's dead. He's like, we think we've died. Like, it's pretty hilarious. But I mean, from the smoker's point of view in the counterculture, because it came out, I think this was like 6 years ago it came out. It was hilarious at the time. Nowadays, when you have a little more compassion, you're like, yeah, that's probably maybe not quite so funny to laugh at these days, but knowing what they're going through. But I do felt like or at least karma was served, when he stole it from some kids. But yeah, it's pretty hilarious. It's worth looking up, So,
That's funny.
but um, what point? So you started your own cannabis company recently. You were saying.
Yes.
Okay.
So I ended up going to work for that CBD company that I was
Uh,
talking about when I went and met. So I took the plunge, went and did it. Remember, my mom's first words was like, "How the hell am I supposed to tell my family you're selling cannabis?" I was like, when I told them like, "Hey, I'm going to work for this," but it was a
I'm
CBD
paying
hemp company,
taxes,
so it's like I
Mom.
eased them in.
Yeah.
But so I was there for a year. I went and did, and then I went with another company that produced both CBD and THC products, and went there as a sales manager to kind of help get their sales department up and running.
Nice.
And it was while I was there that I really started. So my background is in sales management, sales leadership, and training.
Hmm.
So I really noticed, especially with dispensaries, there was just no training. Like there's all these dispensaries now; it's becoming more medically acceptable. You're getting a new cannabis consumer, and they're not training. And I would be in there, and that's back to the edible point. There was one time I was in there, and I hear this guy telling this lady, probably in her 60s, like, "Oh yeah, this edible, this 50 milligram Cushy Punch edible is great. Like it's perfect. You should try it." And I'm like, and
No.
she gets it, but then I'm thinking, yeah, I was like, has she ever tried it before? Do you
Yeah.
know if she has, or what if she takes it and then she has to go pick up her grandkids or her kids in 2 hours?
Yeah.
Doesn't know. So then I just started like seeing that and realizing like how there was no training or education, started looking into it. And so it was actually about a year ago, exactly a year ago, I was in Hawaii for Thanksgiving last year.
Uh-huh.
And when I was there, I was like, you know what? I'm going to start consulting or start doing this. The company I was working for, there were some promises they made they didn't keep. There were some issues with them. So I knew I wanted to get out. So it was either going to go back to my old company or start something. So that's when I made the decision. It was a year ago, actually, that I was going to do this. I was going to start consulting, figure it out. I had sales training material already that I had taught at my old company. At Ashford in education. And so what I did is I just started writing it out and conforming it to the cannabis industry and then bringing in education.
Nice.
So when I first started, I had to learn and educate myself. Like I told you, I was researching it. It worked for me. I wanted to tell other people, but that's what happened when I started working for this first company. Everyone's calling in. You're getting Gina from, Mississippi or someone from New York that they're like, what's the CBD? I hear it helps. Is it going to cure me? They want to know how it's going to help them.
Right.
And so it was just realizing like, how are these people, this industry is growing so fast, they need so many employees to come into it, but no one's educated properly or knows how to even ask the right questions to be able to meet these consumers' needs and make sure that they're getting the right product versus them just coming in. It's like, oh, I love flower. There's stuff that gets me so high. When people are just like, okay, well, I have cancer, so is this the best way for me to take it, or what strain's the best, And so that's why I started working with a couple local dispensaries and doing some in-person training. And they were seeing great results from it. Just even the little tweak in how they talk and teaching them on CBD. I did some CBD patient awareness days too, where patients came in and I talked to them about CBD. Because that's another thing, is CBD starting to get so big, not very many people knew about it.
Right. And
that was more my background the last couple years. So that's why I just kind of started writing some material, and then I decided to put it online. And in January, I had met a guy who runs a cannabis accelerator program. So if you're familiar with like Y Combinator, 500 startups, or Silicon Valley, accelerators are a big thing out in Silicon Valley with tech companies.
Okay.
They invest in you, but they get a good chunk of equity, and you go through like 4 months of mentorship.
Gotcha.
And helping you build a business.
Gotcha.
So I had met this guy, Eric Gomez from Canopy San Diego, one night. It was the same day that I was like, okay, maybe I need to look into investment opportunities, right, for the company to really scale this. And so I met him and we started talking. And so I reached out to him. I was like, hey, this is the idea I have. Like, yeah, we need education, but people also need sales training. Like, they need to know how to sell the product. They can't just have a product and be able to ramble on about it, but then they're not going to meet their consumers' needs, or consumers aren't going to understand what's best for them. So they need both areas of it. And so yeah, I got into that. And so I went full time last April with it. Nice. So MJ Hybrid Solutions is the name of the company.
Very cool.
So MJ obviously can be Mary Jane, but it's after my name, Melissa Jane. So I go by MJ.
Nice.
And then hybrid, obviously there's hybrid strains out there, and I came up with hybrid because the whole goal is to develop compassionate and results-driven employees. So it's
Nice.
all about developing employees to be able to meet the consumer's needs, but also be able to increase their sales. Because when you're meeting your consumers' needs, creating customer loyalty, you're going to increase their sales as well. And you're educating. And so I just wanted to take what I did and I was helping with new customers coming in asking about CBD or cannabis and how it's going to help them. I just want to take that and be able to develop and teach others to do the same.
Nice.
So that's really, so yeah, MJ Hybrid Solutions, we launched and did a soft launch in the end of July. And I quickly got on, I have about 16, 17 dispensaries now doing the training program. So I got a good start. But then I slowed down a little bit. I was putting out just mediocre trainings and stuff. So right now I'm in investment mode and I have a new marketing crew and we're about to interact, redo the trainings, make them more interactive and educational.
Nice. Cool.
And because, it's growing so fast, and all these states are now just switching to medical marijuana.
Yeah.
And
how many states are we at currently, do you think?
We are at, I want to say 33. I know New Jersey just changed some things. I think we're about 32 or 33. That's if you include the limited medical marijuana states, which is CBD only states.
Yeah.
So Alabama has a CBD only. Actually, I think they just changed the medical marijuana. But there are certain states like South Dakota or
yeah,
West Virginia that have or Utah right now is a CBD only state.
Right on. Well, wow, I'm surprised Utah even let that in. Utah's pretty conservative.
Yeah, they're about to put it back on the ballot again for the medical marijuana.
It should get.
They have a huge opioid they're like the third. What are they? The second or third state with the worst opioid price.
I lived in Utah for 7 years.
Your mom lives too.
Yeah. What's up?
So that's where my mom lives.
Oh,
my family that side.
Yeah, no, it's so I've also been arrested in Utah and spent a little bit of time in jail. I got arrested for cannabis. I got caught with 2 ounces
Really?
in separate bags with a little scale, allegedly, and they frown upon that in Salt Lake, and so I was taken to an underground facility where they strapped me to a chair, and the fire department came and drew my blood. And from there, they took me to jail. I did not pass go. I did not collect $200. And it was definitely an interesting experience. 90% of the people were in there for opiates or some type of drug-related offense.
I think we're close to 40 now. Sorry.
I was talking about 40. 40 states. Wow, that's excellent. So Utah, just huge states. I lived in Springville. It's a small town south of Provo. Mm-hmm. One of the this tiny little community, and it's one of the worst states or cities in the country for prescription abuse. So there's that part of it. Plus the mountains in Utah. Like I explained, people don't realize that Utah is an awesome place to live. It's an awesome place to party. It's an awesome place to spend time. I describe it as a lot like Colorado, just Colorado's a little more organic and Utah's a little more Mormon. But you got the mountains there for like snowboarding and skiing and cross-country skiing and snow machining. You've got people hiking and climbing in the summer and, just all kinds of kayaking going on. Those types of activities, a lot of times people are going to be smoking a little weed, when they're out there doing that kind of stuff, just because it enhances the experience. So I think the demand for medical marijuana or just marijuana in general in Utah, I always got great bud in Utah, so people love it there already. So it's, but then again, there's that strong conservative side to Utah. I don't know if they'll ever go medical. But I thought that about Arizona. So
I think they will for sure. But I think they'll wait a little bit. I don't know. I could see Utah going faster than even before it's federally changed.
MJ, when they talked about legalizing it last time, the leaders said they didn't want it because it could grow wild and rabbits could get high from eating it. I mean, it's not like they're obviously grasping at straws for reasons to keep it illegal.
Yeah.
I hope it goes
But if
legal
they
there.
have a CBD, I mean,
Right.
Idaho is one of the few that doesn't have anything.
Yeah, I can see that. Wyoming? What about Wyoming?
No, Wyoming's not on at all either.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's only showing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 states with no legal cannabis use. Indiana, South Dakota, I think that's Wyoming, Oklahoma, and Idaho. I don't know what's the other state next to Colorado? I'm looking at a blank map.
Nebraska is just east of Colorado. Wyoming is just north of Utah.
Yeah, so there's those four, like South Dakota, Nebraska, Wyoming, Oklahoma.
That makes sense. There's a real conservative states there. Nebraska, man, it's an agriculture state. Like they could get a hold of that, man. I mean, hemp, industrial hemp.
Oh yeah.
A lot of money for those guys in Nebraska.
Yeah, they don't even allow the CBD. And even Indiana, just yesterday, the Attorney General came out and said, nope, CBD is completely illegal for marijuana. There's a whole, people don't understand the breakdown. People just hear, oh, CBD oil is illegal, but they don't understand the breakdown between hemp and marijuana.
Right.
Two, CBD can be very beneficial from hemp. And so there'll still be a little bit of THC if it's done the full extraction with the whole plant.
Yeah, but at that point, we're talking about parts per million at that point, right?
Yeah, it's like 0.08% to 0.03%, because what happens is when the plant grows, a hemp plant, it's under 0.3%.
Right.
Right? But then once you extract it and decarboxylate it and you turn it into an oil, when you grow the CBD percentage, when you go through the scientific stuff, you grow the THC grows a little bit with it.
Right.
So I had people that did CBD hemp products that failed the drug test. So there is some THC when it grows. And if you're taking a ton of it or vaping all day, you don't realize that it adds up.
Yeah.
And depending on the amount.
Yeah, that's the thing is it sticks in you. It stays in you for a long time.
Yeah.
Compared to other drugs.
Yeah, it's difficult. But that's the thing is I think there's certain laws that are in place that allows it if it's from overseas with hemp, CBD is fine. But then CBD from marijuana is technically illegal to ship across the state. But everyone with CBD from hemp, which is so funny because it's the same thing.
No, it's exactly the same thing. Yeah.
Where it comes from, whether it's from the marijuana plant or the hemp. It does not distinguish.
You're getting down to molecules. Like a molecule is a molecule. Like it doesn't matter if it's extracted or synthesized. It's still that exact. Like if it's not exactly the same, it's not that molecule.
Yeah,
is what people don't realize.
That's why. Yeah, I always say that CBD from cannabis is the same as CBD.
Exactly
from cannabis.
The same. Yeah.
So that's what these states come out or they'll say it. But the thing is, if CBD from hemp also was illegal, especially during the time that the FDA, DA, the last couple of years are trying to fight it, and these companies, hemp companies, are shipping it across state lines. Don't you think by now they would have gone in and raided these big companies? But why don't they raid the big companies? Because they can't. Because it is technically fine with CBD hemp. They don't do it. These guys have lawyers and they know every law in and out. They just do it. They put out stuff to scare people because it is the little guys or the little health shops in these little towns that freak out because they're little mom and pop shops. I wouldn't sell it if I was a mom and pop shop and I wasn't, I was scared. So they go after these little guys to scare off people in hopes that it would hurt business for the big guys. But they would have closed down. I mean, that's CV Science is a publicly traded company that I worked for a year and a half. Like they would have. And so I always try to tell people that it's just trying to scare them. It just blows my mind though that when the Indiana guys, Attorney General coming out saying CBD oil is illegal unless you have an epilepsy. Really in Indiana, what else is going on there? That's CBD oil. You're really going to sit there. And and I get that they're trying to go off of federal, be more the conservative, but
it's ignorance though. It's an ignorant law. It's an ignorant federal law,
It's a complete back to the prohibition days. It's completely back to when they needed to do it. It's a racial thing. I 100% believe it.
Back at during the days of reefer madness, one of the most, well, now it's hilarious. Back then, it was probably terrifying to people. Is that they told people that it would make that if white women smoked marijuana, it would make them want to have sex with black musicians. This is like in the 40s, and white men were like, "Oh my gosh, what? No," So I mean,
yeah, and then it was this poor African American community, or they're all smoking pot, and back in the day when racism still exists, but back in the day too, when it was even more, they used that as like a thing to try to prove they just needed something,
Right. Well, racism was a lot less disgusting back then than it is now. We've started to evolve as a people. But and if it wasn't black people they were targeting, it was Mexicans. Marijuana is what is a Spanish term used for it. It's just crazy how demonized it was. And before Prohibition, what was the percentage of hemp products in all pharmaceuticals?
That was a huge thing too.
Yeah,
because it was a direct competition of cotton.
Yeah, cotton, paper. For
paper. Exactly. So then
and now
not even hemp. That's the other thing people don't realize is how beneficial hemp is in so many other avenues of your cars, your houses can be built with hemp. How much it would save.
The original Ford Model T prototype was built out of hemp to run on hemp ethanol.
The Ford.
Yeah, because Henry Ford had tons of hemp growing on his property. He had a lot of land. But yeah, it's just crazy how demonized it became, like the smear campaign against it, and how effective it was and how resilient it was. I mean, you have people out there that still really believe that this is a bad thing. Most people
in Arizona,
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so obviously we know it didn't pass in Arizona last year.
Right.
When it passed in California and a couple of the other states that, and I know majority of my family in Arizona probably voted no on recreational. So yeah, I got them kind of bought in with the medical thing. My dad loves CBD. It helps him tremendously with diabetes, with everything.
Good.
Helps him very well. And so, and I don't even know whether he voted yes or no, but I'm sure a lot of my family members in Arizona probably were thinking, some people would say, oh, well, recreational, I don't want it recreational because then anyone can get their hands on it, blah, blah, blah. But people didn't understand that on the flip side of when it goes recreational, you're looking at all these people that are in jail too, right? These people that are in jail for having an ounce on them or for doing it. And when it goes recreational in these states, it gives them the opportunity to get out based on a certain amount or people that may not have access to getting a medical card or I don't know. There's so many different ways to look at it that recreational can be beneficial. But people are just so caught up on thinking, oh, if it goes recreational, my kids are going to have access or adult, teenagers are going to start smoking it all the time.
Well, let's go down that rabbit hole a little bit. Say you're a parent and you have the opportunity to vote on this and you have a kid. Yeah. And say you love your kid, but let's say, just for hypothetical reasons, let's say your kid's a shithead. Okay? The real question is do you believe that a kid should go to jail and have a record for smoking a joint? And if you answer yes to that question, then you're heartless because honestly, even if your kid has an opiate,
you just don't have a clue.
Right. Well, even if your kid has an opiate problem or a cocaine problem, seek help before incarceration. I mean, I don't know. I obviously, I'm against the war on drugs. I feel like addicts should be treated like patients and less like criminals. I think we're
it hasn't worked. I mean, it's been going for since the 80s, and things are worse now. There's no it hasn't war on drugs. Who was it that Reagan? Was it Reagan?
Nancy Reagan and Ronald Reagan. But yeah, just say no. That was Nancy Reagan. Yeah,
it's not. It hasn't done anything, and so people are still acting. It's just people get so caught up. Look at Jeff Sessions, right? This guy, I don't know at this point if he refuses to admit he's wrong or if he really is just that much in his head that he refuses to look at any type of actual research that there is. Like Israel has so much research on cannabis.
Yeah.
And we even have a lot here. I work with a doctor that's been in the industry for 13 years that I partner with. He does my educational content. And he's had over 200,000 medical patients he's seen.
That's awesome.
So he does a dosing project right now. So there's research out there. It's just not like federally approved or whatever.
Last I heard Rick Doblin talk about this. Rick Doblin is a guy from MAPS, MAPS, and they're an institute that researches psychedelics. They're the ones that are researching MDMA for post-traumatic stress disorder.
And the mushrooms.
Yes, and they're working with Johns Hopkins Medical School, so they're legit. They're not messing around. They work with the DEA. Rick Doblin said that cannabis has just entered phase 3 testing, so that lasts about 15 years. They're not when phase 3, because there's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Phase 1 testing is when basically everything up until 2007 or 8, when you just all the hearsay of, hey, I heard this cures cancer, hey, I heard this is good for arthritis, hey, I heard this is, that's basically phase 1, where there's a buzz about something that works and there's results. Phase 2 is when they take everything, they take the plant and they grow it, and the nitrogen that they feed it, they have tabs on the origins of every precursor it took to synthesize that nitrogen, and same with that magnesium. Like, they know where all the precursor came from everywhere that they feed to this plant, so that they can know exactly what goes into it, and they can level off THC levels. Of course, it goes different for MDMA. It's different for any type of chemical they're testing, but with cannabis specifically. Phase 3 is, I don't know the details of it, but I know at the end of phase 3, that's when it's covered by insurance. So, yeah, so I still think we're about 15 years away from that. But so invest in the stock market with cannabis medicine now, But
well, I'm curious too, because back to Jeff Sessions.
Right.
So I was talking to someone. I was at, I've been at a couple cannabis events the last few weeks, so I forget which one it was at. But I was talking to someone about it, a group of us, and it was a friend of mine in the industry, and she's from Alabama. She's from like Mobile, Alabama. So she, cute girl with the accent, whatever. But she has a very conservative family. And
isn't that where they filmed Forrest Gump?
You what?
Isn't that where they filmed Forrest Gump? Mobile, Alabama? I think so.
Mobile, Alabama?
Mobile, Alabama.
And so she was talking about, because Jeff Sessions comes from her area, and so she was talking about just that deep South, that they're just so rooted that they really just don't look at it any other way. They're just so stuck in that bubble. But I feel like at some point, if you're going to be the attorney of the United States, the general attorney, you have to be open-minded to things, and that's the problem. Is he's not. I mean, he has an 11-year-old right now. There's 2 NFL players and an 11-year-old girl suing him for medical marijuana. An 11-year-old girl who needs it for her. I think it's for epilepsy or another ailment she has, and she's suing him. And it's actually going to trial. They speed up the trial. It goes to the trial beginning of next year sometime.
Well, with epilepsy, it's amazing. Like, you can YouTube people having epileptic seizures or not epileptic seizures, but episodes where they vaporize it, and it's like someone. It's like it's like
Parkinson's. I've seen that.
It's like they're turning a knob, and the symptoms just slow down and go away.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's. I mean, I've dealt with customers and patients anywhere from epilepsy. I've had patients who were taking 9 OxyContin a day, got down to 1 with CBD hemp oil.
Wow, 9 a day.
Yeah, and so I've personally, and I'm not trying to make claims that it cures cancer, but I've had patients who are no longer have a tumor or have cancer when they started consuming cannabis based on the amount that they did. And it's different for everybody. Right. And there's different avenues that it can help with, but I've seen it from every direction of every ailment, and people are like, oh well, it's just placebo or whatever. How does it help that many different things? But that's where you start bringing in, like you said, the science and understanding the receptors in the body, and how when we have ailments, a lot of times it's because there's a deficiency in our endocannabinoid system. But pharmaceutical drugs go right to the issue. There's nothing that works with the endocannabinoid system right now that's known except for cannabis that binds with those receptors, the CB1 and CB2. So, and you'll see probably over the next, like you said, 15 years, where there's going to be so many other cannabinoids discovered that are just as beneficial that are already in the cannabis plant that we just don't know enough about.
Right.
Like, you know, you have CBG, CBN, there's these other, you know, THC, the acidic version. They all have some type of benefit, and they all either stimulate or bind to the receptors in some type of way. Some more so with CB1, some more so with CB2 receptors. So then based on certain things like MS patients, I noticed do really well with the 1-to-1 ratio, having one part CBD to 1 part THC mix.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get super high. You're just going to have like a mellow, but that's what I've seen them do really well with that based on MS, where it is in your body and the receptors that correlate with it. So I mean, it gets complicated, of course, but I think if people understood, like if actually people got the whole fact of like just understanding the basic endocannabinoid system is there to balance every organ system in your body. So it basically balances every organ system in your body, every major organ system in your body.
Right.
Therefore, when you take a CBD product or you take THC or cannabis, CBD, however, whatever you want to say you're taking, smoke it, ingest it, vape it, whatever, it is going to that area, and it's help balancing it out. And so that's why too, when people like you say it's like coffee for you, when you smoke cannabis, it helps you be very focused. Some people it doesn't. Some people it doesn't make them very focused.
Yeah, no, that explains why.
That's going to be based on the deficiency amount in your endocannabinoid system. So people with ADHD, they could take it and become very focused. People without ADHD could take it and not be focused.
Right. That explains why people say, "Hey, it makes me feel this way," and someone else will say, "Well, it makes me feel this way." You know,
just like, yeah, people will say, come in all the time, like, oh, I want this because my friend takes it. I'm like, okay, but you got to understand it may not work for you the same. Or they'll call back and they'll be like, it didn't work or it didn't do anything. Okay, well, cool, we need it. But that's where the training and education comes into play for employees in this industry, is to helping them understand and be able to talk to your patient and explain to them the basic understanding of what it can do and which way it could go and how to work with it. So I always tell patients, give it a 2-week period. Start small. You always want to start small. One hit, one oil, so a pea-size amount of the oil, however you take it, a tiny piece of the edible. Start small and work your way up, because then a little bit can go a long way. But then sometimes you need a lot. And so if you don't get the right amount right away, that's what's happening. Is a lot of people, like my sister's that way. Oh, it doesn't help me. Like it doesn't help my, But she has a lot of joint issues. Vaping might be the best thing for her, but she doesn't want to vape. She's not going to sit in her house and vape with her 4 kids,
Yeah. Well, with vaping, I would say if you have a family and you want to do it discreetly, that oil pen is probably the best route you can go, because you can go in your bathroom, hit the oil pen.
Oh yeah, I have I have a CBD vape pen and a cannabis one that has both. But that was funny when my mom was here and she was sleeping in the bed with me.
Yeah.
And my whole family here for Thanksgiving a couple years ago. And I remember I would just do it right next. She didn't even know because she was like half asleep.
Right.
And I would just puffs to go to sleep, like if I forgot to take the CBD oil.
Yeah.
And then I remember like down the road I brought it up, like, well, yeah, sometimes I smoke or sometimes I vape. She's like, you vape? You do THC? I was like, Mom, I've done it right in front of you. You just like don't know. Like,
that's funny.
But then again, it goes back to them like, oh, you do THC, like THC is the devil, when THC actually has a lot of benefits, like for neurological benefits, it helps a lot with your the brain, the receptors up there. So
I in the early aughts, like 2003, 2004, I had a psychiatrist who was trying to get me. He was a good one too. He was trying to get me on some anti-anxiety meds and some antidepressants, and I went through like 3 or 4 of them, and I did everything right. I went through the proper amount of time, and I was like, listen, this isn't helping me. I don't feel anything, and like I wasn't like completely oversaturated with emotions before. I just needed to kind of relax a little bit and kind of get out of my head a little bit. And not to mention, everything that he would give me would destroy my stomach. I would just have the worst stomach pains whenever I was on any of these pharmaceuticals. And I was like, man, nothing works as good as pot. I was totally upfront with him, totally cool with him. And he was like, all right. And finally, after a while, he's like, you know what, man, just stick to the pot. I mean, I even tried Xanax. I tried Lexapro. I tried, oh god, 3 or 4 ones that you take every day, and then of course Xanax you take in the moment when you need it. Um, yeah, Xanax gave me seizures. You know,
Really?
just horrible, horrible. Um, but yeah, he was just like, dude, just smoke weed, but don't do it as much. Don't do it before work. Don't. He told me not to do it before I drove anywhere. Which I think if you're extremely high, you don't want to operate any type of heavy machinery. But I think if you've got a little bit of a head change with cannabis, you're probably fine driving. I don't think it super impairs people. I may become very unpopular for expressing that opinion, and people may not agree with me on that.
Well,
But
I think it's different for everyone. Because me
yeah,
personally, and because so for me, I can't really smoke. I always joke like, "Oh, I'm still looking for my Adderall strain." Like I can't really smoke a ton. Like I've done a little bit of THC where and then I've been able to go back to work.
yeah,
But like during the day, there's some people that smoke on breaks and need to smoke all the time, and that
yeah,
helps them focus. For me, it doesn't. It can make me tired, certain strains, certain things. So I don't really do it a lot during the day. If I need something during the day, I just do CBD.
right,
And so then, too, on that point for driving, if I smoke, I don't want to drive at all because I don't
yeah,
know how I am. But
right,
there's people that have smoked for years and just take a couple hits, they're fine. They're not going to be,
yeah,
and it's hard because there's not something specific, a device out right now either to catch it.
yeah,
So, I wouldn't tell people like, oh, you should be fine driving on it. But like you said, it's not like, oh, he smoked, he's high, he's out of his mind. No.
right, right. But you do have a head change that you have to
To
be careful about.
help you
Yeah,
focus. Like you said, some people can help them focus. So sometimes they might be better driving.
yeah.
Some people claim they drive better that way.
I feel
Um,
like I double check everything when I drive high.
yeah.
Like
So
I
just yeah,
triple check. My
um,
speed's good. My mirrors are good. Okay. My space cushion is on point. You know. Uh, anyway.
because I kind of feel like tobacco gives people a different kind of it doesn't give them like it gives you a little bit of a head um change. It doesn't,
Yeah.
I mean,
A
not
little
to
bit of a
compare
zing.
you or anything. If you had 5 cigarettes versus if you had 5 joints, you'd be high out of your mind.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
I feel like that, or there's certain, caffeine or certain things. If you have too much of it, you can get jittery or.
Yeah, I used to when I had a job traveling all over the U.S. where I would install music players in like Fry's or Albertsons or Kroger's. Like yeah, when you're driving and you're walking through Kroger and you hear like a deal on pineapples, like that music system I would install. And I would smoke cigarettes when I would pull all nighters to stay awake on the road. I'd drink coffee
Yeah,
and smoke cigarettes.
yeah. A lot of people like to smoke
So,
when they drive. It helps
but
them. Like
yeah.
it just keeps you awake because you're doing something, I guess.
Well, and it stimulates the mind. Um, a lot of writers will smoke before they start to write because they start to fire away. Like I know, I have a friend that's an editor that sometimes will smoke a pipe, like a tobacco pipe before he writes.
Yeah.
So, but
But it
because
stimulates the mind, and I think with
distinguished.
cannabis, that can be a stimulator for people as well,
Yeah,
based on ratios. So it's hard to say, but I mean, I agree with you. I don't think there's going to be a limit. Eventually, I think they'll come out with something that would be a certain amount that could be, because I mean, it's kind of difficult right now, and you don't want to tell people, oh, you should be fine, or people to
well,
risk it.
tolerance plays a factor
Even
too.
if something happens, you're going to still be held liable at this point.
Yeah,
Even if there was no issue, but you have it in your system.
even if you haven't smoked for 2 days. At this point, you can still be held liable because if it's built up in your system, that's crazy. And like tolerance plays a factor too. Like you can take like 1 10 milligram edible and have your tolerance at a certain level because you've been smoking a lot every day and it affects you one way, versus if you don't take anything for a month and then you take that same 10 milligram edible, it's going to hit you a lot harder because your tolerance has dropped. So there's that aspect of it too. So it's hard to
True.
say, but
And you build up a tolerance to it as well. It's
yeah,
good to take
take a little breather, a little fast.
a little breather. So yeah, it'll be
So,
interesting. January 1st with California being the largest market. It's going to be,
yeah,
I think next year, seeing how it goes will be a big game changer for a lot of other states and even federally looking at it.
yeah. How far away do you think we are from changing it from a class 1 to a class 2, or is it class 2 right now? It's class 1, right?
Class 1.
Yeah.
Class 2 would make it a pharmaceutical, which I think that might actually hurt the cannabis industry a little bit if it was.
Yeah.
I think a class 3 would be. I mean, in my mind, it shouldn't be any class. It should just be there.
Yeah, I mean, there's no class for coffee. Yeah.
I know.
So.
But it's, some people think it's still going to be at least 5 years. I think I think 5 years at the most, in my opinion. I think at this point, now that we're, like we talked about, we're looking at what, 30, 40 states. Yeah. Now that Denver just had their 5-year anniversary with when they went recreational, right? Or when they voted it in. And they've put out some good stats, and their opioid use is down. And with the opioid crisis going on, I feel like over the next couple of years is now these more states, especially California. California makes up like 35% of the cannabis market in the U.S.
Huge.
I mean, it's expected to hit like $7 billion by 2020 out of the $20 billion or whatever that it's supposed to hit. And so I think California is going to be a big factor in determining it. And a lot of people are going to look at it because a lot of research, a lot of statistics are going to come, bigger statistics are going to come from California because it's a larger state.
Right.
So it'll be interesting. I mean, I think with the fact that we're now, like we talked about, there's only like 6 on there that didn't have any type of medical marijuana laws.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, and then with Trump in office, look what happened a couple weeks ago with all the Democrats winning in New Jersey. So now New Jersey's already, like, the new guy's already looking to make some changes with the medical marijuana law.
Right.
The governor in Florida is getting sued right now.
Christie, the last governor of New Jersey?
Who was the Christie?
Was it Chris Christie?
Well,
wasn't he in there for a while?
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think he's been out for a little bit.
Politics. I do a little more now that I'm in cannabis industry because it plays a lot into it.
Yeah.
But like even Virginia got the Democrat took over. So I don't know. I just feel like it's becoming now it's like 70% of people believe that at least medical marijuana should be available.
Right.
So I just feel like it's just moving so fast in that direction that there's just nothing they can do to try to stop it.
Yeah, the cat's out of the bag.
I personally think the federal government is waiting until they figure out how they can control it and make money from it to really make the changes. I don't think they're really looking at it. I mean, except for Jeff Sessions, like, oh, we got to stop this and get it out. There's no way, we got to stop it. Yeah. They're just figuring out how they can control it because you can't just change it and then not have controls in place.
Yeah.
It's hard to track where the plant comes from. Like, just like when they go in and raid stores, you can't, once the product's made, you can't really determine if it comes from a marijuana or hemp plant, right?
Yeah.
Like a CBD product, you go in and it's like a tincture. They can go raid the store and they can test it for THC, but if it's low THC, they just really don't know if it came from a marijuana or a hemp plant.
Right.
So there's just a lot of things that aren't in place for them to be able to control if they feel like it might get.
Yeah, even with strains now like Charlotte's Web, where it's super high CBD and super low THC, but it's still a flower from marijuana that you smoke. I mean, who's to say?
That's like the CBD hemp that's grown in Colorado right now, and there's this good, we started carrying this. The second company I was working for started buying it from Colorado, and it was like, oh, this hemp, it tastes really good, like so different because the hemp from overseas, the CBD hemp that I was used to, just had a really bad aftertaste. And then there's this hemp coming from Colorado, and it has, like, you can just tell by looking at it, the crystalline, like it has these terpenes in there because there's certain terpenes that don't come from the hemp plant that come in the marijuana plant.
Gotcha.
That can be very beneficial. So like myrcene, limonene, there's certain terpenes and that's a whole nother, that's a whole educational piece on.
Yeah, I know a little bit about terpenes, but not as much as I know about.
That really determines the sativa indica. Like sativa doesn't necessarily mean an upper, indica doesn't mean a downer. Like there's terpenes, there's the whole synergistic effect that can benefit. But I started looking in.
Can't they take terpenes from like a strawberry and put it in like and make it flavor like an oil pen or something like that? Like
a lot of companies do, like even the oils with those essential oils, they call them kind of terpene flavors, and they put them in because the essential oils, like that's the company I worked with, they're big on the Chinese herbal medicine.
Right.
So they would take the terpene or these essential oils and mix it, and they were getting great results because you put in black pine. What was some of the major the essential oils? I forget their names.
I'm
There's
not.
that are very like popular that you put back in, and they help with inflammation, right? So you're
Yeah.
mixing that with CBD, and CBD helps a lot with inflammation. So then it gives it even more of a synergistic entourage effect. But that's what I joke. So even in Mesa, right? You know how essential oils is kind of a big thing.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Selling, like the house moms, the Mormon moms love selling this, which is great. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think it's funny when people they're sitting there and bashing marijuana or cannabis, and they're selling essential oil when it all comes from. And if you look at Chinese herbal medicine, cannabis is their top 5 like precious like plant, right?
Yeah.
Where these oils are right after it. So it's all from like the same, like if you look at Chinese herbal medicine, ancient Chinese from 3,000 years ago, it's all like kind of in the same line.
Yeah.
So it makes me laugh because I'm like, cannabis is like, no, like you're selling essential oils, but then you're anti-cannabis when it's like.
It's the power of propaganda.
I know, right?
Yeah, I mean, have you ever watched Reefer Madness?
I've read it, I've looked at things. I have never watched it all the way through, though. I need to.
I think I've made it like 3/4 of the way through. At some point, it's so ridiculous you just have to kind of turn it off, But yeah. But people believe that stuff back then, Go. I remember all those little anti-drug, like say no to pot commercials we'd have back in the day, like with Dare and stuff. I mean, you really believed that, like if you used marijuana, you would be a bad athlete, and that it would, when in reality, like there may
saving
not,
some athletes' lives.
yeah, there may not be a better chemical on the market for the NFL with concussion for concussion treatments and things like that.
Well, look at UFC is already now taking it off.
Good, and
then I know, I think baseball will be the last one. Baseball seems to be the most conservative.
Baseball's kind of very white bread. Like, yeah, they're not gonna.
Well, in baseball, you don't have as many like head issues. You don't have.
It's not as hard on the body.
It's not as apparent, where like football, even though football is very conservative, they're actually starting to really look at it because there's so many football players with the CTE issue. If they were actually, I mean, and let's be real, we all know like probably 80-90% of them smoke anyways off season whenever they need to. They're going to smoke, especially at this game. But that's what there's a doctor that's on the he was on the board at the company I worked with, that he was the head neurologist for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Mm-hmm.
And he had helped a kid who got hit by a drunk driver that had like some major head issues, and used CBD to help bring him back. So that's something they're really looking at, is if you're taking even CBD products. I even tell my sister and brother, my niece or my nephews play football, tackle football. And they start really young. And I ask them, like, can we just give them CBD daily as a protected? Like, I take it as a preventative.
Yeah.
Because if it's help keeping you in balance, and it's help like with your certain receptors, then it's going to help with you heal faster if you got a concussion, or if you have that. So,
well, with jiu-jitsu, a lot of jiu-jitsu players will smoke weed. And a lot of times it's for the inflammation. I mean, you get my biggest thing from jiu-jitsu is at night when I'm trying to sleep, my elbows will flare up. And no matter how I lay them, I have to lay on my side, and I have to hold my hands like this,
Oh, wow.
and that's how, with a pillow close to me, when I'm having a flare up, and that's how I can fall asleep. Otherwise, if I'm laying like this, like if I put my hand, it's straight, sideways, anywhere I lay my elbows, I feel in them, except for just like this. I won't take Advil. I won't take Aleve and things like that. I probably should get some nice CBD oil. We should talk about that when we're off the air. I want to get some from you. I mean, but I smoke regularly, so I guess using CBD oil up until now hadn't really occurred to me. So,
well, and you could get some topical stuff to put on too that will help the inflammation.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just you get in your neck and stuff too. I mean, jiu-jitsu is a rough sport on your joints, so your knuckles. Oh, yeah. Your knuckles go through it with jiu-jitsu because you're making grips on the gi and everything. So, but yeah. Yeah,
I mean, it's gonna make better athletes down the road. It's gonna be. It will definitely change in that avenue. I think with some of those sports, it might obviously have to be once it's federally changed. But it makes a big difference, and they're already seeing that with a lot of athletes who claim. There's a lot of ex-NFL. I worked closely with one who played in the 80s, and he thought he was going to have to get his leg amputated. He had
Oh,
his knee is just a huge, and he didn't until recently come out that he was using medical marijuana. So he was smoking pot, but then he started when I was working for this company, Pure Ratios. He had these patches that we would, that he got a hold of, and so that's when we started talking. And those patches, he put them on right over the area, and they helped with the inflammation, and he was able to
nice.
do with stretches and stuff. But he basically went from being told that he was gonna have to get his leg amputated he had it was so bad. I mean, his knee. I mean, I can't explain this on the air, but it was huge. Like the
Yeah,
size of his knee was like the size of a football.
dang.
So then he's told he's gonna have to get his, and then he goes from being told that to okay, well, you may not have to get amputated, but you're probably not gonna be able to walk again. Then now he's like walking. Okay, you probably won't be able to run, but now he's just working his way
Wow. That's an
back, and
extreme case. That's amazing. That's
now
awesome.
he's been out. He's been out about it now too, and there's a few others that are just notice a huge difference, and you have to take it after they play football. I mean, we look at a lot of people too that look at them and they have committed suicide, or you look and then they have the
Junior
CT,
Seau. Yeah.
yeah, Junior Seau, and
And the
there's a
thing
lot too
is,
that can be fine, but some of them don't have it as bad as others, so it's
yeah. And the thing is with professional sports, I mean, these guys give their entire life and their future health to entertain us. We really do need to start coming up with some better ways to protect them and also treat them when they're hurt. Some recovery medicine needs to step
oh
up
yeah,
and things like that. And if cannabis is spearheading that industry for recovery and better treatment for athletes, then I'm all about it. I mean, I know for me, I've felt a lot of different benefits in my life. And it was kind of a long road to get there because when I started smoking it, um, you did not have the big push that you have now. Like you didn't have housewives and soccer moms getting high in the afternoons, to deal with everything instead of taking Xanax. Yeah, and of course, being raised Mormon, they weren't cool with it. They're cool with it now if you have a prescription and if you vaporize it. But I had to deal with that for a long time, feeling like I was a bad person because I loved to smoke weed. But after a while, I came to terms with it. Probably in the early 2000, probably 2007, 2006 is when I really started to come to terms with this. Like, no, this is a positive thing in my life, and I don't care what anybody else says. I know this has helped me. Um, Man, even with social anxiety, like I could
yeah,
smoke and be around big groups of people all of a sudden and be like, wow, like I don't feel totally awkward and yeah, pretty pretty amazing how there's so many universal benefits to it, whether it's physical or mental. So
yeah, I mean, yeah, and people are gonna see it. It's gonna, I get a lot of moms that call me from Mesa or from friends from Facebook that will reach out to me
yeah, I've given
and ask
people your
questions like,
information.
oh, I have a kid who has severe ADHD, or I have, this or that, and so once you talk to them, explain them. I mean, they're still scared because a lot of people they want permission from their doctor, and it's hard right now because I think a lot of doctors right now they weren't taught anything.
Yeah,
I probably know more than 60% of doctors out there. And I can't say I know every little breakdown, or I could give you every little scientific breakdown, but these doctors were not trained on anything in medical school that had to do with cannabis. So they're learning too. And to
right.
them, if you're old school and you're just thinking, you're stuck in your ways, or the pharmaceutical ways, and you're just thinking, well, there's not enough research, you're very scientific or factual, of course you're gonna
Yeah,
be like, you can't, and they can't tell you because they don't have, I'll hear of some doctors that might like off the record, or go out like after they meet with them and then walk off and say, hey, if you end up using cannabis, I'm just telling you, like, I can't say you should, but I'm just saying, like, kind of do a little
yeah,
nudge and pull of like, no, you should do it. But there's still a lot that don't want to say anything because they don't
right.
know.
My doctor
Um,
has always been very supportive, and when you have a doctor that's open-minded to it, and I'm lucky that my doctor's had family members that have loved it, in the past. But he's always, whenever I talk to my doctor, I never felt like I had to hide it from him.
Yeah.
It was always, which is important. It's important that you feel like you can be 100% honest with your doctor, no matter what you're taking, even if it is illegal. Tell your doctor. Like your doctor needs to know if
Well, yeah, I mean,
you
especially if
know,
it's helping too, you need to kind of just
right.
admit it.
Well, even if it's bad, like even if you're doing something that you shouldn't be, at least be honest with if you're going to be honest with anybody, be honest with your doctor. So, but I'm lucky my doctor's always been very supportive. So, but MJ, you have been excellent, excellent guest. As far as one thing I did kind of want to talk to you about real quick is laws with shipping and things like that. Like when you have a THC company or a THC product, you obviously can only ship it to other recreational or medical states. Do they have to prove
Well, no,
like,
actually, technically, with THC products you cannot ship at all. Like, ship
really?
out of
Okay.
state.
Wow. Okay.
Technically, those products that have to be grown within the state. So, like a lot of people, I'm sure, still do it. Will ship THC to certain other states are legal, but
Yeah.
technically it has to be grown. So that's why with a lot of these, there was a lot of states early on, like Michigan, I think had an issue for a little bit where these laws change, or Illinois, certain laws change, but then you don't have cultivators there, or it
Yeah.
takes a little bit to grow. So you're kind of stuck because you have a limited supply.
Yeah. And let's be
So,
honest, once the state's laws change, everything that they grow for the first 2 or 3 years in that state kind of sucks anyway. It
well,
takes them
yeah,
a
because
couple
they're
years to
figuring it
figure
out.
it out,
It's different climate. Well, that's the other
Yeah.
reason why you gotta be like, oh, OG Kush is the best for me, and then you go to a different state and ask for OG Kush because it could be grown in a completely different climate. So
Yeah.
it could be a completely different strain.
Right.
So that's the other thing is, yeah, it's not for it to kind of come through. It's not that great. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. Once federal law changes, how it will work. It'll probably set up kind of like distribution. But right now, technically, you can't ship across states. CBD hemp, people do. I don't. Technically, you can't ship all 50 states. People say all 50 states. I know, like, there are some very strict laws in certain states, so some companies won't ship to those states.
Yeah. You don't want to
But
have
there
what
hasn't been an
happened.
issue. There's been times when it's been confiscated where I've like shipped CBD hemp products to overseas and it's been confiscated or they
Wow.
test it. But if you just show them the right paperwork or that where it's grown, where it's come from, and it's grown from an actual
Yeah.
hemp plant where it comes from, it's usually fine.
I would
But
be
some things
worried
have been
about.
confiscated.
I would be worried about having a Tommy Chong incident happen. Did you ever hear what
Yeah.
happened to him? That was such a witch hunt. That was such bullshit. Like they're gonna go after an icon that has only just made people laugh his whole life. Because he loves cannabis. So for people who don't know what happened to Tommy Chong, he used to have the Chong bong, and a bong is a water pipe that you smoke marijuana out of, and he could only ship it to certain states. And there was one state, I don't remember what state it was, that he could not ship it to, but there were federal agents in that state hitting him up all the time saying, just ship us this stuff. And I think it was his son who finally just caved and was like, yeah, ship him. And so he sent some water pipes. He's basically sent glass to a state that didn't want the shape that the glass was in. And when they came after him, instead of having his son do the time, he's like, "No, it's my name, it's my company. I'll do the time." But yeah, just a bullshit
Yeah.
witch hunt. But it could have been a lot.
And
I mean,
there's certain states that people are still getting caught, like arrested and charged or serving time for having the littlest amount.
like a joint.
And then you go to the next state and it's legally,
Yeah,
recreationally. So it's bad. It is because even out here, I mean, Obama I know put in a lot of things in getting those people, the drug crimes. A lot of people got out that
yeah,
were serving major time for drug offenses, but I don't know. It's crazy, but that's what I mean. That's the flip side that people don't realize with the whole recreational part of it is you have a lot of good people that are in jail right now that were either doing it and sending it to someone that needed it that got
hmm
caught. Granted, yeah, there's the drug lords. There's people that do the big amounts or do
yeah,
certain things that maybe, yeah, they weren't paying their taxes, they weren't doing things right. But there is a lot of good people in jail that I know that served time that they were doing it for the specific reason they would send it overseas or over state lines because that
yeah.
person needed it because they had cancer or
Well,
they were
even
growing.
and even
So
if like you are a pot guy and you're selling weed to whoever wants to buy it, and you buy, we'll say a pretty good amount. Let's say you buy 4 pounds. And for a single guy selling pot out of his house, that's a pretty big amount.
Right.
I would say at least a pound of that is going to the right places. People who actually need it. At least. So I mean, when you bust a pot guy, like even though, yeah, that pot could be going anywhere, you're also shooting people in the foot who really could benefit from that cannabis.
Well, and at the end of the day, like you're selling heroin, you're selling that kills people. Have died from heroin. People have died from pharmaceutical drugs, OxyContin. We probably know a few ourselves that we could think of. Like, Mesa. So that's just people. Even if you're selling marijuana, none of it. I mean, again, obviously, if it's coming from somewhere that's laced with fentanyl, where they try to say it's laced with that, or bad, or the synthetic kind. But if you're actually selling marijuana, you're not hurting that person. You're not putting them at risk to overdose.
Right. And people will say, I've heard the argument, weed could be laced with something. And like, let's be honest. There's not a heroin dealer out there that's going to waste his heroin lacing weed with it. You know what I mean? Like, heroin costs money, and plus it looks completely different. Like, if I buy a bag of weed and there's little black stuff all over, tar over, I mean, like, what is that mold? Like, what did
people might do it to get them addicted to that weed to want to come back to that specific strain, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I don't even think, the thing is, there's
out
there about it, but there's no proof of it. Like, it's something that just politicians or people are trying to come up with. They're trying to come up with every scenario possible as to why cannabis is just so bad, and they don't have one.
Well, and the whole lacing cannabis with something else is just a scenario that when you like,
you can lace a cheeseburger with it.
well, it just doesn't make sense. Like what you're lacing this substance with is more profitable than the substance you're lacing it to. You know what I mean? Like, this is less expensive than this, and this is what you're putting in to get people
exactly.
So it's like the logistics just don't make sense. Like, so when people say, it could be laced, it's like horse shit. I don't believe that argument for a second, unless somebody intentionally loaded the bowl and put cocaine on it, which does happen, but you have to be around people who do cocaine for something like that to happen. I mean, like, there are people that will party with harder drugs and weed, but that weed is there as a result of the counterculture, not necessarily what it does to your mind. So.
And it's kind of the whole thing, even with the psychedelics, like you talked about. I mean, that's a whole nother episode, a whole nother thing, dynamic. But there's, like you said, the research on MDMA, because that used to be in the 80s, that was a therapeutic drug for couples therapy.
Yeah, the couples.
And now they're seeing how it can benefit with PTSD or the magic mushrooms. I think that's what it's called in California. Something just passed with the magic mushroom.
Oh, did it?
And obviously, if it's controlled. But even those type of drugs don't necessarily. I mean, I guess people have died at concerts and stuff from MDMA or from dehydration. If you
MDMA is a tricky one.
Yeah, I don't know.
It brings your body temperature up, and you can. Yeah. Sometimes people will drink too much water on it.
That makes sense.
And you can die from it. I'll be honest, I've done it. But let me a little backstory. I'm pretty open with who I am on this podcast. I got mugged, 2001 or 2002. I got hit in the face with a tire iron and got robbed and rocked me back the guy smashed out my back windshield, rocked me back on my car when he hit me. It's a bad scene. If I would be at a park and kids were playing, and I heard that scream, the hair on the back of my neck and the hair on my arms would stand up. I'd be sweating. My heart would be pounding. I'd be like, what is going on? Like, why am I feeling this? I'm in fight or flight, Yeah. A gunshot, a loud noise, like anything would send me into it. And I was just like, what the heck? And it was right before I moved to Utah. I did MDMA twice in Utah, within probably 3 years of that incident. And it was never I feel better. all of a sudden, I realized, like, hey, man, it's been a while since I've had an episode where I've gone into fight or flight. And I realized that I made that connection even though I didn't think too deeply into it.
Yeah.
And then later on, I read studies about MDMA being a magic bullet for PTSD. And I think what I was experiencing was a mild version of PTSD from the mugging.
Yeah, that's exactly what
And I feel like MDMA pulled me out of that. For me, I felt horrible for weeks after I did it. So I really didn't have any desire to do it after that based on that.
You feel like it got your PTSD completely gone? Like, or not, I didn't say you have PTSD, but say, because you said it got you out of that, but did it continue to, even though after it wore off, did it continue to get you out of that?
Oh, yeah. Like, I've never had an incident since then.
Fight or flight since
Yeah.
then.
Like, well, I mean, if I've had a fight or flight incident, it's because I've been in an incident where it was warranted. It wasn't needless, It wasn't a children squeaking with laughter in a park and me going, "Oh my gosh, the world's ending!" But I mean, yeah, like
it makes you curious because it's like, do they have to keep taking that to?
No, it's
then,
supposed to. It's supposed to be
like three,
one or two dosages.
Yeah, like, 1 or 2 doses, and then it can help get you out. Which, in that case, I mean, if it's a controlled thing, that's worth it because.
Yeah, for sure. Well, are you familiar with Iboga and Ibogaine for opiate use?
No, I've heard of Ibogaine.
Yeah, that's a crazy one because it's got a 93% success rate. Well, Iboga is a little different. Iboga is the plant they take it from, and it's Ibogaine is the pill they take it when it's been synthesized. But it's got a 93% success rate to cure, not treat, but cure opiate addiction after 1 dose. But it's like an 18-hour trip where you're throwing up, you have diarrhea, you're nauseous.
Not people that like to go into those places that just like you have to kind of go off by yourself to be.
No, you go into a place called the Ibogaine University. It's like a clinic. It's like a clinic. Like you're supervised by not only a shaman, which kind of guides you through the trip, but also a doctor who like takes your vitals and things like that. Because people have died on it. It's considered the scariest psychedelic on the planet. And like you can actually Google Joe Rogan Ibogaine, and he's talking with a guy named Aubrey Marcus, who's one of the owners of On It, who's big into psychedelics. And he talks about his Ibogaine trip. It's about 15 minutes long, and it's just amazing the way he describes it. Like, I really feel like Iboga is going to be that spearhead that really mortally wounds the opiate epidemic. And I think that cannabis will provide people the safe head change they need once they're out of it, because I've heard that people's attitude changes toward opiates after this trip. I heard they look at it like, yeah, I don't need that anymore. I don't know. It's not like, oh, I'd still like to do that, but I'm not going to. It's like, no, I'm done, which is, it's crazy for heroin and things like that. But yeah. Crazy. Before we wrap things up, is there any plugs you want to give out or shout outs or any things like that you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, just if anyone wants to know more information, go to mjhybridsolutions.com or reach out to me. I'm happy to send information.
Are you on Twitter?
Twitter?
Yeah.
Yes, MJ Hybrid.
Okay.
I think it's just MJ Hybrid on Twitter.
All right. What about
I will eventually in the next few months be kind of coming out with some educational pieces for consumers, but right now I really focus on obviously training the employees in this industry.
Nice. When you come out with that stuff, we'll have to have you on again to talk about it.
Yeah.
So
do that, and then if you have any, if you're curious about anything, also if you have any curiosity in investing, I am open in my seed round as well on seedinvest.com.
Very cool.
You can check out our information on there.
Nice. One thing I do like to ask the majority of my guests, and it goes right along with cannabis beautifully, because we all know that cannabis makes music sound amazing. What kind of music have you been listening to these days? What's been on your playlist?
My playlist? Oh man, I do. It's lately I've been I love hip hop. Yeah. I love hip hop.
You go.
But I go back, like lately I've been listening to a little bit of country as well. I kind of go back
Yeah.
and forth. It's funny, country and hip hop.
Do you ever listen to
Uh,
country hip hop?
Country hip hop?
Yeah,
Like
like hip hop.
hip hop?
It's
No, I
it's a
don't.
thing. All
I'll have
right.
to look that
Okay,
up.
so here's some bands to listen to. There's a guy named Haystack,
Haystack? Okay.
Bubba Sparks, of course, you've probably heard of him from that song "Getting Ugly." What else? Who else? Haystack and Struggle Jennings, grandson of Waylon Jennings. So he's got some good songs too. He's actually got a song that it's a remake of Outlaw Shit by Waylon Jennings, and he raps with. I think it's Outlaw Shit. Anyway, there's one where he raps with Yellow Wolf. That's pretty good.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, I love country music. I like Sturgill Simpson. I like who else have I been listening to recently with country music? I like a lot of bluegrass, like Devil Makes Three, Old Crow Medicine Show. Um, Devil Makes Three. Okay, I can't. I'm going to think of all these bluegrass bands as soon as we hang up here, and I'm going to be like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So hip hop though. I've been listening to a lot of Roots lately and a lot of Mad Child. I've got a jujitsu playlist where those kind of go through it. I know it's an odd hip hop mix there, but there you have it. So
Yeah, whatever it is.
right on. MJ, thank you so much for coming on. You've been an awesome
You.
guest. I think my listeners have been enriched and educated from this conversation we've had. Next time I have you on, I'm going to try not to cut you off and talk over you so much. But the listeners, all couple dozen of them out there, put up with me in spite of all that. So, but
Well, I think too, with those that don't know much about it and have curiosity, just keep an open mind and really understand and get to know the education behind it, because it could really save someone's life that is around you. Being
yeah,
open to being able to share that experience with them, or what they might need to know, or what they might need to look into to help them
right.
with something.
So, but yeah, I appreciate your knowledge. I think we just kind of scratched the surface. I think we need to have a lot more conversations on this and kind of dive into things a little deeper. Um, but
Back on in January, February, once California's gone wreck, and see how.
yeah, we talk about the aftermath.
Yeah, see what happens.
So, thank you very much. Thank you for tuning in,
Thank you.
Planet Earth, and above all, be excellent to each other. Bye bye.